Okay, let me just cast my eyes on this side. There is a gentleman right over there, please, sir.
I'm Chan Kam Kit from Verity Partners on SME things. On this levy question and two questions really. One is I wonder how does this increase in foreign workers levy can actually help us improve productivity. We talk about construction industry, hospitality, but I'm more concerned with the healthcare. I happen to volunteer at a nursing home, and there's a requirement that you need one person for 2 residents or one person for 4 residents. And therefore, no matter how, you have to have the person for the 2 residents, one nursing aid kind of thing, for 2 residents. So you just have to pay the levy because you cannot change that by productivity. I can have a nurse who can do very well, but I have to go with the MOH requirement of 1 person to 2 patients, 4 patients. So that's one. I wonder if there's any interministerial thing to sort this out, because if I can improve the productivity of nurses, maybe I should be able to reduce the number of foreign workers. The other question I have is on training and automation. There's this allowance given right now. I mean, it's been mentioned by Anna that there's incentive there. I just wonder, as Ilong mentioned, are there qualifiers? Do we have to define automation and training? Or is it just, as long as it's what we define, what we think is automation and training, and we will get the deduction? Or does it have to fall into certain, or you don't want to go and argue with the IRAS that this is automation or training after the fact?
Okay, so if I can just summarize your questions. The first one is, how do we increase the productivity of a healthcare worker? For example, a nurse who's taking care of 2 patients. That's your question, right? Or 2 or 4 patients? Because the nurse has to be looking after the elderly in some...
I mean, by increasing the foreign workers levy, it just impose a greater burden on charity to have to raise...
charities, okay.
It's a charity that I'm with, that have to raise extra costs just to cover the levy. Because what else can you do?
Okay, so that question, shall we have the EDB answering that question? The second question is on the criteria for getting the training and accreditation allowance, right? Automation, okay, training and automation.
I will answer the easier one. I think automation, there is a prescribed list of equipment for which it is in the Income Tax Act. I think they are also reviewing the list, so automation is quite simple. I think training, there are 2 parts to it. One is external training, one is in-house training. I think the external training portion is also quite clear. The in-house training, if I'm not wrong, more details would be made available on what qualifies under the 250% deduction. I guess the other question on increasing productivity of healthcare is not that straightforward. The other point is really whether we could have Singaporeans and PRs that have been displaced from other jobs to be trained. I know NTUC under E2I, Employability and Employment Institute, WDA, are putting in a lot of efforts to basically retrain and upgrade the skills of our people so that they could be emplaced in other jobs in Singapore. So one option is really to work with some of these agencies to see how else can you actually look at the employment situation in that industry. Ed?
One thing, just my personal view about productivity. Productivity, if you want to increase productivity, we either have less people doing the same work or same number of people producing more. I remember when I was studying in UK, that was a long time ago, my only decent meal was at night going to Chinatown and having char kai fan, this roast pork and chicken rice. And I remember on one floor, that's on the 2nd floor, there was only one waiter serving the whole floor, which has like 15 tables. I look at our restaurants, we have like 6 or 7 waitresses serving the same number of tables, and you have to wait like 5 minutes before you get their attention. I would say that that is productivity. And the reason why this chap in London is so productive, I actually asked him. I said, well, why is it that you run all over the place taking orders, and then they have this internal small lift that brings the food up. You run to the lift and literally almost run to the table. And then he told me, he said, look, I can tell my boss to have 2 people, but that means I will have to share my tips with another person. So that is the truth about the productivity. If you can emphasize to the workers that if they are more productive, they actually get more of the fruits, they will become productive.
That is a good point. I hope it answers the question by the gentleman. Are there any other questions? There's a lady over here. Somebody raised a hand. No? Okay. Now, coming back to where PK Basu was talking about, he touched upon the marginal tax rate, the top marginal tax rate for individuals. You were going to say something toward the end when we asked you the question about the corporate tax rate of 17%, and you thought that there was scope for harmonizing the top tier rate for individuals with the corporate rate. And of course, Yelung disagrees because of the ministers, but can we have your views, please, PK?
I have no self-interest in this. But anyway, now the point is, I think just from a tax administration standpoint, there is an argument for harmonizing the top rate of individual with corporate tax. But of course, again, that would be a little inconsistent with my position, because I've always held that Singapore has no trouble collecting tax. So ease of collection is not really an argument that one should use for taxation. But I don't think evasion is particularly easy in Singapore either. So in Europe, that's an argument that can be advanced. I'm not sure that in Singapore it stands much scrutiny. But I think there is an argument that can be made for harmonizing the 2 rates of tax simply from a tax administration standpoint.
Well, I think over the long run, we should harmonize corporate tax and individual tax, because a tax system should not discriminate between forms of doing business. So given the fact now we have corporate tax at 17, individual tax at 20. If someone was to set up a new business and he knows that he will be profitable, obviously he should incorporate, because he will be taxed at 17%. And if you take the partial exemption into account, then his tax rates are lower. However, if he was to do it as a sole proprietor, he gets hit 20%. So from a tax policy standpoint, we should look at harmonization. But the more important point is we are trying to attract skills and highly mobile professionals into Singapore. And we know that these are the bankers, the traders. They do businesses traveling everywhere. Traders do it over the phone. So they can efficiently do it in Singapore just as much as they can do it in Hong Kong. So when we have a differential that is substantial, then they will think, well, we can relocate to Hong Kong just as easily, and the individual tax rate there is 15%. So shall we move there? So that's something that we should consider.
Okay, Yelung, while you have the mic, I have a question for you about the mergers and acquisitions allowance for SMEs. In your experience and based on what your clients might have been talking to you, is it likely that many SMEs will be merging? And if so, what more can or could have been done to facilitate or encourage mergers among the smaller entities in Singapore?
Well, I do not think that merger and acquisition allowance by itself will push people towards mergers and acquisition. Because when you do a large merger and acquisition, just the professional cost alone will be quite substantial. So there must be